You were taught to be good. To smile, to behave, to achieve, to obey. But deep within you, beneath the practiced smile and well-mannered responses, there is a storm, a darkness, something dangerous. Buried. But it did not forget you. Imagine a child sitting in a dark room, holding pieces of themselves in trembling hands. A voice outside says, "We only love you when you're quiet, when you're nice." So the child locks away those pieces in a small wooden box and slides it under the bed. That child was you, and the box is still there, waiting. This is how the shadow is born, not from evil, but from survival. You didn't choose to split yourself. But now you must choose whether you will stay divided, or remember who you were before the world told you to forget. Because what you locked away isn't just rage or fear or lust. It's also your fire, your voice, your raw, unshaped self, the one capable of creation, love, resistance, depth. You've been taught to fear the dark. But Jung's truth is this: without it, you can never be whole. So the question is not, do you have a shadow? The question is, will you dare to look inside the box under your bed? And what if the face you show the world, the one you call you, is actually the biggest lie you've ever told? That mask you wear, where did it come from? Next we look at the mask and the mirror in our lives. You wake up each morning and slip it on. The mask. Sometimes you don't even notice you're doing it. It's second nature by now. The pleasantries. The performance. You show up as the version of yourself you believe the world finds acceptable, desirable, safe, normal. This mask has a name. Jung called it the persona. A carefully constructed identity you wear to survive in society. The polite worker. The dependable friend. The quiet daughter. The tough man. The smart one. The kind one. The spiritual seeker. You are not lying exactly. You are just curating. But over time, what began as protection becomes prison. You forget where the mask ends and you begin. You have become estranged from yourself. The persona is necessary, society demands it. But what happens when it becomes your identity? When you've suppressed the shadow for so long that the only self you recognize is the self that pleases? What happens when the mask becomes more familiar than your own skin? You walk into a room. You smile. You nod. You say the right thing. But inside, you're screaming. You want to cry. You want to disappear. You want to say something real. But you don't. You can't. Because the mask has fused with your face. You've become a ghost inside your own body. But the psyche doesn't tolerate lies forever. Eventually, the cracks appear. In exhaustion. In panic attacks. In shame you can't explain. In rage that erupts out of nowhere. In the haunting feeling that something is missing. So it begins to leak. You hate people who are loud, because they reflect your silenced voice. You judge those who show desire, because you were told yours was sinful. You resent those who set boundaries, because yours were erased. The world becomes your mirror, and the shadow peers out at you, through everyone you can't stand. What if the people you criticize the most are really just pieces of you? Unlived, unspoken, unwanted? And here's the terrifying truth. What you suppress, you project. You're not just wearing a mask. You're looking into distorted mirrors, seeing yourself in everyone you blame. And it's not just psychological. It's spiritual. You've lost touch with the soul that trembles behind the persona. The soul that wants truth, not approval. Presence, not performance. But what if, just for a moment, you took the mask off? What would you find? Not perfection, not clarity, but something better, truth. A face that can cry without apology. A mouth that can speak without strategy. Eyes that can finally look back in the mirror and not turn away. But it gets more complicated. Because even if you begin to remove the mask, your shadow will not be satisfied. It will not whisper. It will demand to be seen. Loudly, irrationally, emotionally, especially in the one place you're most vulnerable. In your relationships. And that is where the shadow gets dangerous. The shadow doesn't just live in solitude. It comes alive in contact. It feeds on intimacy. Because nowhere are you more exposed than in relationships. When you fall in love, when you get close to someone, you think you're meeting them. But often, you're meeting yourself in disguise. You project your unlived desires onto them. You assign your unhealed wounds to them. You imagine they will complete you, understand you, save you. And in the beginning, maybe it feels like they do. They mirror the part of your soul you've forgotten. But then, something changes. They disappoint you. They reveal themselves to be human, flawed, confusing. Or worse, they trigger something in you you didn't know was there. Suddenly you're angry, jealous, afraid, overwhelmed. You say, "They brought out the worst in me." But what if they just showed you what was already inside? The shadow lives in the space between self and other. It hijacks your love stories. It sabotages friendships. It haunts your family ties. Because it craves expression. And when you won't look at it, it uses the people closest to you as a canvas. You accuse your partner of being emotionally distant. You rage when your friend cancels plans. You resent your sibling's success. But deep down, if you were to sit in absolute silence, if you asked yourself without defense, Could it be that you're the one who is afraid of connection? Of needing someone? Of being seen and rejected? What if your wounds are speaking louder than your words? You think you are angry at the other person, but often you're angry at yourself. For being vulnerable, for being scared, for needing love and not knowing how to ask for it. The closer someone gets to you, the more your shadow reveals itself. But here's the paradox. It's in the friction, in the conflict, in the rupture, that your shadow is illuminated. Relationships become a crucible. They don't just reflect your shadow, they magnify it. And if you're not conscious of it, you will keep choosing people who hurt you in familiar ways. Not because you deserve pain, but because your unconscious is trying to finish a story you never resolved. This is why some patterns repeat. Why you date the same kind of person. Why you fall into the same smiling, silent. You wake up gasping. You dismiss it. Just a nightmare, you tell yourself. But the shadow remembers. Every time you run from a dream figure, every time you suppress a recurring nightmare, you push the shadow deeper. But it always returns. In stranger forms, more twisted, more urgent. Because what you don't integrate in waking life, you must face in your dreams. And there's a hidden gift here. For Jung, the shadow in dreams isn't just darkness. It's also potential. The criminal in your dream may be your repressed power. The wild beast may be your buried desire. The decaying corpse, your ungrieved past. To the untrained eye, it looks like horror. But to the conscious soul, it's an invitation. So how do you respond? You don't run. You turn around. You face the nightmare. You walk toward the darkness. And you ask, what part of me are you? Because in the dreamscape, every monster wears your face. Just upside down. But you don't only dream at night. Sometimes, your waking life becomes the dream. a trance of routine, avoidance, control. And sometimes the shadow appears not in images, but in compulsions, addictions, obsessions, sudden urges, things that possess you, and you don't know why. That's the next mask it wears. There are things you do that you can't explain, habits you hate but repeat, urges that sneak up on you like ghosts in daylight, secrets you've kept so long they've become part of your skin. You tell yourself you're in control, but late at night, when no one is watching, you feel it. Something else is driving you. This is the shadow too. Not as a dream, not as a projection, but as a compulsion. You reach for the drink, not to celebrate, but to forget. You scroll for hours, not for pleasure, but to numb. You fixate on them, romanticize them, obsess over them, not for love, but because they distract you from the ache of your own disconnection. The shadow emerges as addiction, not just to substances, but to people, to patterns, to perfection, to punishment. And the worst part? You keep it hidden. You live two lives. The one others see, productive, helpful, balanced, and the one in the margins. The compulsive spending, the secret browser tabs, the private rage, the late-night spirals. You tell yourself, this isn't me. But that's the mistake. It is you. Just the part you haven't owned yet. The more you try to suppress the shadow, the louder it becomes. It rebels, not with words, but with behaviors that contradict your values, with impulses that leave you disgusted, with choices that make you wonder if you're a stranger to yourself. But here's the truth Jung uncovered. Addiction is often the shadow's cry for wholeness. You don't drink because you're weak. You drink because there's a part of you in pain. You obsess not because you're foolish, but because something in you is fragmented, lost, searching for reunion. You don't need more discipline. You need to reclaim the parts of you you've abandoned. Your power, your grief, your joy, your darkness. And here's the most dangerous twist. The more successful you become at suppressing the shadow, the more likely you are to create a false life. One that looks beautiful, inspiring, even spiritual. But deep inside, there's a hollowness, a duplicity. And that's when the shadow becomes not just a threat to your peace, but to your soul. Which leads us to the most seductive lie of all. That you can be good by being incomplete. But the psyche doesn't want goodness. It wants wholeness. You were taught to be good, to behave, to follow the rules, suppress the rage, silence the lust, hide the envy, to smile even when you feel dead inside. You became obedient, moral, proper, and in doing so, you may have committed soul suicide. Because goodness, in the way the world taught you, is not wholeness, it's halfness. Jung warned us. Yet morality, as culture defines it, is often about appearances, not authenticity. Compliance, not consciousness. You don't become whole by choosing the light and rejecting the dark. You become whole by embracing both. You try to be kind, but resentment simmers underneath. You speak with love, but your eyes betray exhaustion. You help others, but secretly feel bitter when no one sees your pain. You call it virtue, but it's denial. And the shadow grows stronger in denial. Because the more you perform goodness, the more you split yourself into fragments. And fragments fracture. In many traditions, evil is externalized. A devil, a demon, a dark force out there. But Jung looked inward. He saw that evil isn't out there. It's the part of you won't face. Not because it's monstrous, but because it's honest. Your selfishness, your rage, your desire for power, sex, control, autonomy. You think these are shameful. But Jung saw them as necessary. Not to be indulged mindlessly, but integrated consciously. Wholeness means you stop pretending to be good and start becoming real. Not a sanitized version of yourself, but the full, raw, contradictory, evolving being that you are. You admit, yes, I want to help, but I also want recognition. Yes, I forgive, but part of me still wants revenge. Yes, I love, but part of me fears being consumed. That's not hypocrisy. That's humanity. And until you own that, you will keep punishing yourself for feelings you didn't choose, instincts you can't eliminate, and thoughts that terrify you. Not because they're evil, but because they're yours. The shadow is not asking for permission to take over. It's asking to come home, to be seen, heard, understood. To no longer be the outcast inside your own soul. But integration isn't easy. It demands something more terrifying than confession or control. It demands confrontation. And that's where we go next. You've run long enough. You've suppressed, projected, moralized, escaped into dreams, addictions, personas. But the shadow, it doesn't tire. Control, allow feeling. In the moment of shame, speak truth. Integration is not perfection. It's intimacy with the inner wilderness. And once you begin, you'll start to notice something else. The world around you begins to change. Not because it's different, but because you are. You'll stop needing villains to fight. You'll stop idolizing saints. You'll stop splitting the world into good and evil, black and white, worthy and worthless. Because now you see. Everything outside is a mirror of what's inside. Which leads to the final threshold. The ultimate psychological and spiritual transformation. Not the fight against darkness, but the dance with it. You no longer fight the shadow. You no longer run from it. You've stood in the fire and chosen not to flee. And now, something ancient awakens. Integration begins. You do not kill the shadow. You befriend it. You do not dominate it. You dance with it. The dance is not easy. It's messy, rhythmic, wild. Sometimes graceful, sometimes jarring. But it's alive. And it's yours. This effort is the alchemy of the soul, where gold is not mined, but forged from lead. There is a day you will look into the eyes of someone who once triggered you, and feel compassion, not contempt. There is a day you will feel anger rise, and instead of suppressing it or The dance is not about perfection. It's about participation. Showing up. Falling. Returning. Speaking the unspeakable. Loving the unlovable. Bringing the exiled parts of you into the fire of presence. And watching them transform. And as you continue this dance, you'll realize something else. You are not alone. Every human being carries a shadow. And those who deny it the loudest are often most enslaved by it. Which is why true leadership, true healing, true love begin not with charisma, but with congruence. And that brings us to the final portal, where Jung's insights converge not just into therapy or philosophy, but into destiny. Because when you own your shadow, you unlock yourself, your true self. The one not defined by ego, fear, shame, or image, but by wholeness. Now, finally, you approach the threshold that Jung called individuation. Not self-improvement, not enlightenment, but the birth of your true self. You were never meant to become perfect. You were meant to become whole. And that wholeness demands you pass through the labyrinth of your shadow, to reclaim the parts of you left behind in trauma, silence, and exile. You have done this. What is the self? Not the mask. Not the ego. Not the identity shaped by family, religion, culture. But the center of your psyche. The divine spark. The totality. The self is not something you create. It is what remains when everything false is burned away. And individuation is the fire. You remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Before the shame, before the masks, before the fear of judgment. You remember the strange, fierce, curious child who felt everything too much. who dreamed with reckless awe. The reason you feared your real self was because it shattered the illusion. It simply reflects, and in it, you see not a hero, not a sinner, not a victim, not a savior. You see you, the child and the warrior, the coward and the mystic, the animal and the angel, all of them, still breathing within your bones. This is what the shadow taught you, that to love yourself, you must know yourself, not just the light, but the rage, the lust, the envy, the fear, the ache, and not as flaws, but as features of your wholeness. There is no finish line here, no certificate of transcendence, only moments when you choose truth over comfort, self-knowledge over safety, presence over performance. You will forget again. You will fall. The shadow will return, not as punishment, but as invitation to descend, to feel, to remember. And in that remembering, you return to the dance, not as an escape, but as a ritual of being human, because that's what this journey has been. Not towards some abstract idea of self, but back to the fire inside you, the part that was never broken, only buried. You are not here to become someone else. You are here to unearth who you've always been. So now, as you walk away from this story, the question is not, who should you be? But rather, Will you dare to be who you are completely? Not tomorrow. Not someday. But now. Because beneath the fear, beneath the mask, beneath the ache, you've always known. The shadow was never your enemy. It was your key.